Hello there, everybody. Welcome back. This is Jeremy Miller, your host of the Hire and Fire podcast. This is episode number 11. It's called It's Over. Now What? I share stories about divorce, jobs, etc. Chad and I debate basically what it's like when things end and what you need to do now. So enjoy the episode, and we'll see you again next week. Hi there, everybody. Jeremy Miller, your friendly host of the Hire and Fire podcast, back with episode number 11. I am the founder and CEO of Pirate Consulting, but you don't care about that. But what we have today with us is Chad Sandy. Say hello.
Happy New Year.
Chadley.
Let's go.
Have you ever known a Chadley?
Just me.
You are a Chadley?
No, but
that's what people call you.
nickname.
Okay.
I've never known a Chadley.
Fair enough. So today's episode is titled It's Over. So now what? So we're going to recap all kinds of stuff, a combination of last year, turning over a new leaf with a new job, all kinds of stuff. We're going to dive deep. That's the plan for today. So welcome to episode number 11. So when I sent you this topic, which was random, I didn't preempt it at all, and I said it's going to be titled It's Over, Now What? What was your first thought?
I'm getting fired.
And you made me spill my drink. Yeah. No, you were not getting fired. But that is comical. Did you have one? Did you have like a that hits home somewhere? If not, that's cool. I'm just curious.
Well, no, I mean, the end of the year, the calendar year.
That's kind of what got
is
it.
always just sort of a,
Yeah.
Everything ends and then everything starts fresh and new again. And kind of like spring in Minnesota. It's a very optimistic, for me, it's a very positive, optimistic time of the year when everything's fresh, new, and exciting. And it's the equivalent of starting your Monday diet every single Monday that I do. And
Wow, look at you. Yeah, restarting. Because you epically failed over the weekend, is your point?
I fail every day.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, then every Monday, or not every Monday, every morning I wake up, say, okay, yogurt, cottage cheese.
Right.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Finish it with a hot dog and a piece of cake.
What's funny about this for our listeners is that we went over the Pessimism Optimism show last week, which was our official final episode of 2019, shot on New Year's Eve, which was fun. Now we're into 2020. The holidays are behind us. And me, personally, 2019, good fucking goodbye. Like, I am so happy to see that go. It was a year from hell for me in a lot of ways. I can take a lot of positives out of it, and we can go down that road too.
Sure.
But in general, I've never been a big New Year's Eve guy. I don't really care. Like, the television shows, the ball dropping, like, it does nothing for me. But this year in particular, I didn't watch the shows. I went out. I had a good time. But at the same time, I was like genuinely able to celebrate the closing of the chapter, which was a little rare for me. Did you have the same feeling, or was it like you were sad to see it go?
No, but interesting, I was thinking where you were just saying that about celebrating the end of the year. I wonder if that's a common thing where people feel more celebratory when it's been a shitty year. So you're happy that's done. Versus, yay, what a great year. That was a fun ride. Let's do it again. What do you think? Because my New Year's Eves for years and years now with kids have been, I have no desire to go out.
You stay home.
I mean, to be honest with you, the last 20 years, I'm 51. The last 20 years, the most memorable New Year's Eve was probably 1999 because I was laughing at all the, our plane's going to fall.
Doomsday apocalyptic stuff, yeah.
Well,
and the Y2K.
Yep, Wells Fargo is one of my accounts. One of the news stations was at a cash machine reporting live. Let's see.
Will it work?
Yeah.
Will it work?
That was probably my most exciting New Year's in the last 20 years.
Well, that was the year I graduated high school, and that was also when my oldest daughter, who's now 20, was she was only 6 months old.
Yeah.
So it was we went out. I literally remember going out to a house party. You got to remember I'm 18 years old at the most.
Sure.
and I brought my daughter in a car seat to the New Year's Eve party, which sounds so stupid to say out loud, but nonetheless is true. So for me, it was genuinely a celebrating what's ending. Like, I was excited to see it go. And I honestly don't have many years that I look back on where I'm like, that's a real thing that I was excited to see it die. But for me, that was a thing, right? So we can wrap up the new year. We can talk about changing jobs. We can talk about changing relationships. We can talk about all kinds of stuff. But to continue on this same topic with regards to the new year and to answer your question directly from before, I don't know. I guess on the spot, I'm willing to bet people as a general rule look at the new year with a like positive, what can I accomplish outlook, more so than holy shit, thank God that's over.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Well, I probably fall in the category, if I think about all of the New Year's over my adult life, I would say from about age 18 to 30, New Year's was just a reason to party. I wasn't celebrating anything. I wasn't saying good riddance to anything. It was a night to party. And then since then, more often than not, it's probably been more celebrating good riddance versus, wow, that was a good year.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got divorced today.
Yay.
which is amazing of the timing for the show. We normally shoot the shows on Tuesday, so it just happens to be a Tuesday, and it happens to be the day that I got divorced.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of things that I'm checking the boxes on that have been like weighing on me super heavy, right? Changes in Pyra Consulting, changes in our direction, changes in my personal life. Like, there's been a ton of friggin' change. So I'm really, really happy to see that close, because I will forever look back on 2019 as a year full of like pain and anguish and transition. So for me, even though it's just the flip of a day, you know, I mean, it's just another day. Yeah, when you write a check, you screw up the date that you write on and all that stuff. But it feels good.
Yeah.
Like, it feels good, but it's a combination of turn the page. It really is that analogy, because when you're flipping the page, you're not only starting to look at what's next, but you're also closing the idea of what the hell just happened.
Yeah.
And normally I was in your shoes, and I'm willing to bet most people would agree with you out there, where it's like, it's just a little bit more of the same. You're probably at the same job. You're probably in a similar relationship. I'm presuming the turn of the clock to a new year didn't like revolutionize your life.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no real major, this year was, there was no real major event to look back on or whatnot. If anything, it was a little melancholy at midnight, because from a personal standpoint, personal family standpoint, we're at a place in our life where the next year we're probably going to lose a couple close family members.
Oh boy.
We have a 99-year-old grandma.
Wow.
Who's going to turn 100 in the spring, and
Which is impressive.
and she's now at a point that I would be surprised if she's here a year from now when we're talking. And then Lori's my wife's mother. She has Alzheimer's, even though she's pretty young, and she's now in hospice. So
Goodness gracious.
So it was weird, because when the clock hit midnight, we were sitting on the couch, and two of our boys were there, which is kind of weird, because the other,
Yeah, weren't you prepping to go pick them up at parties or whatever?
two of them, but then they stayed and everything was
All
cool.
right.
But yeah, so at New Year's this year, I could see in my wife, because both those two people I just mentioned are her side, her grandma, her mother, that I think she was feeling a little, not sad, but just kind of, a little melancholy about what the next year probably is going to bring in terms of some personal change in the family, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have a strong desire to care about the clock turning to midnight. It was just more symbolic of the rest of it.
Now, one thing, I wonder if there's symbolism here. I'd like your opinion on this. we were, you know how all of our cell phones, our iPhones, are right on the nuts when it comes to time.
Yeah, like on the freaking Navy clock or whatever
Yep.
they're synced to.
But we stream TV. So I have Hulu at home,
Yeah.
which has a delay. So we're watching TV, and we're like, they start at, I think when it hit a minute, and it starts counting down, and we all look at our phones and we're like, well, it says midnight right now. Right? Because the streaming service you're watching is delayed by a minute or so. So I found some amusement there that when it actually hit 0 and we were doing the Happy New Year, it really had already been New Year for about a minute.
What's interesting about that too is I grew up on the East Coast, so for my entire life, like all of the shows, sports, whatever, was geared towards the East Coast.
Yeah.
And the countdown it's always been the countdown, right? Everyone's in New York.
Yeah.
For some reason. And I think you and I talked about how much we do not desire to stand in, why am I blanking on?
Times Square.
Times Square, thank you. I mean, I've been in New York so many times, but I don't have a desire to be there
Right.
during the shenanigans. And to your point is, where are you going to pee? Do they really have enough porta potties for the 200,000 people that are there?
I could be wrong. I have read that there are no porta potties.
They
They don't set them up. It's literally just like, it's no different than if you were at Times Square right now.
Well, if you've been to Manhattan and you spend a good amount of time there and you're a tourist, basically you live in Starbucks, because there's a Starbucks on every corner and that's where your bathrooms are. And they're brilliant with it because they would rather give up bathrooms and toilet paper and exchange it for $5 coffees.
Yep.
But what's weird about here in the central time zone is that we're celebrating at midnight, but the majority of the country already celebrated an hour beforehand.
Yep.
For us at 11.
But that was funny because both my boys, separate, that had been out, came back home the next day, and the bars that they were at. Now remember, you're at a bar with all the TVs going. But because the real midnight was happening sooner than what they saw on TV, because on TV was streaming television, so it was delayed.
Yeah.
Both of them had these stories of, but it was kind of weird around midnight is people started counting down to midnight before it was midnight on television. So then it kind of made it weird. Like
Because they're looking at their phones.
They're looking at their
TV's on the
phones,
delay.
and then they're saying Happy New Year, and half the bar is cheering, and the other half's still watching TV, waiting another 30 seconds for the countdown. So they said it was just kind of a funny thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was just weird for me, for a guy who normally just doesn't give a shit about the ball dropping. Like, I'll pay attention, but I don't want to watch Ryan Seacrest or any of that stuff. Like, I don't care. But it was fun to have a moment where I was celebrating kind of the turning over of the new leaf.
Yep.
And then obviously when it comes to new beginnings, not a lot of people are starting jobs at the very, very beginning of January. But with the vacations that a lot of people take, and the fact that around Christmas and New Year's, it's weird, right? Traffic patterns are screwed up. Everyone's traveling. People in town, you're out of town, etc. Like, it just has a different feel.
Mm-hmm.
So the last Thursday being, what was that, the 2nd,
Yep.
was kind of the official kickoff business-wise to the next year. But with it being a Thursday, it was just as bare.
Yeah.
So it really didn't start until yesterday, being Monday of the first week.
Yep.
And now it feels normal again, and now it actually feels like 2020. But in our industry here, as anybody would know in the staffing business, like, we are regularly, and I mean regularly, sometimes not even realizing how much we're asking people to do so, is to make these epic, life-changing decisions to be able to start new jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I have started plenty of jobs in and of our own lives. But even with that being said, it's really easy to gloss over the fact that the people that we're working with and supporting here are having these massive, life-changing, like, it's over.
Yep.
I just wrapped up a new job and now, I wrapped up an old job and now I'm in a new job, new colleagues, new routine, new parking lot, new traffic patterns, the whole deal.
Yep.
And I think as a general rule, our industry, even though we know that's happening, it's just happening so often that we devalue the actual life-changing experience that everybody has starting new positions.
Yep. Yeah, we forget that for a consultant, for a contractor, the feeling,
Even a perm person, of course, but I get your point.
but for a contractor, the feeling of switching contractors is still the same as changing jobs. It's the same mental process, only they have to go through it more often. You know, a typical person has their job for what? A couple of years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, on average, sure.
Whereas a contractor might be every 6 to 12 months. So we get so used to contractors finishing projects, starting projects. I just met with a guy today. His contractor is going to be ending. And I'm thinking, why are you so stressed out, dude? It's just, you know, you're moving on to the next thing. But it's because I forgot. Like, well, to him, it's still,
It's a big deal.
you know, when I started here, it's a big deal. There's stress involved.
Well, not only that, but so you have the logistical component, which is stressful. But if you're an hourly based employee, meaning you're a contractor, you know, you're a little used to the fact that that's how your income rolls.
Yeah.
But unless you can perfectly time it where you wrap up on a Friday and start on Monday, like you might have some weird time off in between, which you might enjoy, you might not.
But you're not getting paid.
Okay, so you beat me to it. So you might have like a lull, you might miss a paycheck, for example, which can be incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
No, we're trying to time that both directions. When we have contractors ending, we're trying to time it so that we get proper notices for our clients. We get people starting new jobs, and we understand they have to give notices to the people that they're working at. You know, but those new beginnings are just really, really, really exhausting. And I'm of the opinion, and I'd love to know if you disagree or not, that even if you're excited for the new possibility, your fear and anxiety of the change almost always overpowers any type of excitement that you have for the next job.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I do. I think until the leaving of the old has finished, right? Until that's ended, yes, I think that outweighs the excitement. The excitement kicks in maybe, you know, on day one, like literally right up until the day you start your new role. I think the other stuff.
The anxiety is overpowering.
Right, and it's really not completely over until you walk in the door on the new role, and then you can let that other stuff go.
Yeah, but can you? Like, that's the question. Like, can you move on to something new and be 100% or even 90% excited for the new outcome instead of looking back at what was and like feel great about that being over? Now, there are people leaving shitty situations, shitty relationships, shitty jobs, what have you, and maybe they are by default excited for the next thing. But again, so I just got divorced today, but we've been separated for well over a year. So it's a long time coming, obviously. But I've met plenty of people that are either going through a divorce as well or have gone through that type of thing. And I've met all over the spectrum. I've met people that hate it and are super afraid of it and don't want it. I've met people that are kind of neutral and they're not really sure, but they just know this is what's happening. And I've also met people that are excited as shit. And they're like super pumped for the next thing. So I get it, to each his own on a certain circumstance, but I still feel like the anxiety, and yes, I'm more prone to be anxious than other people, so I do have to give that caveat. But I feel like the excitement is overpowered by the anxiety.
I can see that. I don't know if that's always been the case with me. I have a tendency to mentally it's easier for me to cut ties emotionally and move on and look at the what's in front of me versus what was behind me.
So what's the root of that? Where do you think that comes from for you?
I think I've developed a mindset where I'll tell myself, look, it's just business. That's what I tell myself. And I try to take the emotion out of, you know, what this person thinks, what the old boss thinks, what the coworkers think from the place I'm leaving. If we're talking about that scenario, right?
Sure.
So it's more of my mentality of not being so concerned about how I might be perceived upon exiting or whatnot. And
Yeah.
I just tend to be able to look forward and look at it in much more of just a unemotional business standpoint. You know, the guy I met with today that's leaving, he was just so up in arms over how everyone was going to think.
He was worried about perception.
He was very worried about perception. The company he's leaving, us, the staffing firm that represents him, and how we're going to look at him moving forward depending on how his exit goes. And I kept telling him, look, you have to do what's best for your family. This is a very unemotional thing, you know. And I use the whole Ben Franklin decision-making thing where you put the pros on one side and the cons on the other, and then you just take the emotion out of it. Probably didn't help him, but I'm saying for me, it's a much easier process to move forward and look forward.
Well, I mean, but obviously easier said than done, right? Like in the emotion. I've made the joke to you, and it bears repeating here. When I left my old company of 10 plus years, and I was fortunate and I had a really good run and I won some awards and shit like that, and I was like super angry and spiteful. I really was. Like for I don't know how many weeks or months, I don't remember, but eventually that just kind of waned.
Yeah.
And my ability to process what's next. I'm wording that wrong. I think my negativity and my holding on to the past was thwarting my ability to move on to the new thing. And for me, it was I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It was basically, to the degree that I was holding on to the past, it was not allowing me to be excited for the future. Mm-hmm. And then once I was excited for the future, to the degree that I can embrace that excitement, like moving forward, it allowed me to get rid of the angst, anger, judgment, opinions, perceptions of the past.
Yeah.
And that's a tough deal. And like, we literally live in that world. And to a certain extent, wouldn't you agree that the guy you're referring to, like, that's a legit compliment? Like, that means that we must have done something good as a staffing organization, that he was worried about ruining a good reputation with us, and he obviously felt a connection with you and the client.
Yeah. Now what's the title of this podcast start with? It's over.
It's over.
So I think one's ability to take it's over and make it from this big fat line of it's over, a line of time, to shrink it to a skinny little line, it's over. Is it over? Or are you still hanging on so it's not really over for another couple of weeks?
Because you're hanging on.
Right. So I think, a person's ability to have it be, shrink the time it takes to where it's over means it's really over. Not it's over and I dinked around mentally for a month.
Yeah.
If you can shrink that to, the more you can shrink it, the better.
Well, okay, we had a podcast weeks and weeks and weeks ago that was kind of surrounding the idea of getting fired. Mm-hmm. And that was the main motivator of the discussion. And in that discussion, we were talking about not having closure. And I think the closure component can be very, very exhausting. Because in a lot of ways, when you leave a job, if you get fired from a job, the closure component is tough to get, mm-hmm. especially if you got fired from a job. Mm-hmm. Because you don't really know what the hell just happened. You have an opinion, they have an opinion, you think you're right, they think they're right. And my best advice to people in that situation is you're never going to have any closure. It's just not going to be there. No matter how many ways you think of it, no matter how you process it, there are going to be people at your old job that are looking down on you the way you left. If you left or you got let go, there are going to be people that are looking back at your quote-unquote legacy as either impressive or not impressive. And you just have to understand on some level that people are just going to judge the shit out of you, maybe good, maybe bad.
Yep,
and it just is.
And I had that issue when I left my previous company where I had been there close to 6 years, which was there was probably 6 to 12 months there where I was still concerned with, hey, what are they still talking about me back there? You know, am I still they still talk about me as the first guy in the office that built it?
Right. Do they still give me the credit that I should deserve because I think I deserve it?
but by holding on to that in my own brain, it wasn't really, quote, over. And by holding on to that was going to hold me back to some level or some extent on moving forward onto whatever I was doing it now. And I could break down the whole "it's over" thing right down to our daily activities when it comes to, you know, you submit a candidate that didn't work out for whatever reason in whatever part of the process, and at what point at what point is it over, or is it, well, did you try asking this, or well, did you get this information, or well, you know, how long do you keep going back to the well or keep trying to beat the dead horse before you just declare it's over, so that frees you to move forward, finding new candidates, finding new job orders, you know, whatnot.
Interesting.
And so I still go back to the ability to recognize and shrink the time where when it's over means it's over.
Well, and when you're in the middle of it, you're wrapped up in the drama.
Mm-hmm.
But what you also know, which goes back exactly to what your guy was describing regarding perception, is that you're worried about how other people are processing it. So you're in the middle of it, it's about you, but you're also worried about how other people are perceiving the situation. Like, even think about stupid things like the NFL recently, right? As soon as the season's over, and we're now post the first round of the playoffs, but even as soon as it's over, you got coaches getting fired, and then you immediately have teams hiring coaches, right? Mm-hmm. So Mike McCarthy gets let go from the Packers a year ago, takes a year off, and lands in Dallas. And now everybody is overanalyzing whether or not that was a good thing, bad thing. What did he do before? Is he a good fit for here? What did Jerry Jones feel in Dallas? Blah, 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 blah. And as you and I both know, sports is just male version of soap operas. Like, it's freaking ridiculous, but we still get wrapped up in the drama.
Yeah.
And it's the perception. It's 100% the perception. Because if we had no ability to know anything about anybody else, which is fantasy land, then it wouldn't matter.
Right.
It would just be how you feel about it, and then you move on.
Right.
But because of the perception, because of the feelings of loss, judgment, fear, contempt, whatever other words you want to throw in there, it's really easy to get wrapped up in your own head about it. And I did the same thing. There's nobody out there listening that hasn't, where it's you left a job and it's like, even no matter how it ended, are people missing you? Are they happy you're gone? Did they move on without you like they didn't miss a beat?
Right.
If so, how do you feel about that?
Right. And what I probably needed back then
was a little ego stroke?
No.
Okay.
Just opposite. I probably needed somebody, whether they were involved with that previous company or not, to say, dude, it's over. That chapter's done. What you're talking about now is irrelevant. It's like when a girlfriend breaks up with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Or a divorce.
Yeah. It's over, dude. Move on.
Right. So now I'm in the luxury of a situation where I had a year to be able to process that, right? So this is a little bit different. It's not like we just broke up frickin' yesterday. But at the same time, I feel like the only lesson learned in these circumstances, like a job ending the way you don't want it, or a relationship ending the way you don't want it, is you have to find that sense of closure. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. I think outside friends could be unbelievably influential in your own ability to be able to process it and move on. And just move on.
Right. I mean, right now, look, it's first week of January. In our business, we know there's going to be people who listen to this podcast who at this moment in time are looking back and thinking, had they done this or done that, oh God, I just came up a little bit short of hitting contest or President's Club. And to some extent, that analyzation is good for planning for this year. But if you spend too much time not letting last year be over and reanalyzing how close you came to hitting contests, but if this had gone right or if that had gone right, you're now, every week that goes by, you're affecting your ability to hit contests this year in 2020. So again, I go back to a person's ability to recognize when over means it's over, and now shut the book and open up a new one. Yeah?
Well, I agree. But the problem is again, easier said than done.
Yeah.
You have to go through the stages of grief. So what is it? Denial, anger, obviously acceptance is last, whatever. So like there are just stages of grief that you have to process to be able to move on.
Yeah.
And maybe you're in the fortunate situation where you wanted the next chapter and this is really easy for you and you're laughing at this discussion because it doesn't matter and you're good to go. Mm-hmm. Or you're the neutral guy, or you're the gal who is really struggling with the fact that things didn't go your way. Either way, the only thing that heals it is time. But when you have to go to sleep and wake up and function and pay your bills and fill up your gas tank and interface with your family and interface with coworkers and all that while you're going through the transition, it's exhausting. And even if other people can empathize with you, if they're not going through it in the moment with you, then they don't get it. Because you just forget in a positive sense. Like in a good way, you can forget what it was like. The way I described my spiteful, I'm going to send back my awards to you dipshits comment earlier.
Yeah.
Like I already forget what it feels like to have that level of judgment, anger, frustration. So when you're not in the middle of going through it, you don't really know. Other people don't know what you're going through, and you're equally aware that they don't get it. So you feel like you're on this weird island. And I think that's the part that's really, really gross for almost everybody, because life has these cyclical nature to it where, the old what goes up must come down, or the all good things come to an end, or what this too shall pass, or whatever way you want to word it. Those are true. It's true. And we know that. Anybody who's been alive for at least a decade or two knows that. But that doesn't make the processing of the circumstance any easier.
Yeah.
I guess the question is there a way to speed it up? Is there a way to, when you know you're in quicksand and you're kind of struggling, is there a way to speed that up? I'll leave it at that. Is there a way?
Well, one piece of advice I received through reading a book years and years ago was reading a line that said, if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that it will not last. And so I think the sooner someone can live that and have it be part of their fabric, the better. Now, I tend to take that philosophy, because let's take it to two different scenarios. My life is shit right now. Well, hey, if there's one thing history has taught us, it will not last. So I can be positive. Or life is going really well right now. Well, if there's one thing history's taught us, it will not last. And then I can get all depressed. I have had a tendency, and we've talked on podcasts about my general happiness or optimism. I tend to look at both scenarios with a positive outcome. So if the year ending was a bad year, and I tell myself, well, history's taught us that nothing lasts forever, will not last, then I can feel good that things will improve. But if it was a good year, I generally have the same philosophy, which is, okay, it was a really good year. History's taught us that nothing lasts forever. So I think I can make next year even better. I tend to then keep going up versus, oh crap, I had a good year. But that wasn't always the case. There was a time when I was younger when the year would end And I was old enough to start looking back on several years. And I would go, God, the one year was good, and the one next year was bad, and the next year was good. And I started believing for a while that that's how it was. Oh, I had a good year, so this year's going to be kind of shitty.
Oh.
But that's okay, because the next year will be better. Which then
So you had an every other thing going on.
Isn't that weird?
A little bit.
And then it becomes self-fulfilling.
100%.
Mm-hmm. So somewhere along the line, I changed my tune a little bit to where if I had a good year, then that means this year could maybe even be better.
Interesting.
It wasn't automatically now have to come down.
I listened to a podcast the other day. It was called Stuff You Should Know. And it was like on the top rankings. And I was just kind of trying to see what was out there. And the episode was, I forget what it was titled, but it was basically, why is it that time goes faster as you get older? And I was like, that's true for me. Seems to be true for everybody. So I wonder what they have to say about it. Primarily, all they did was take the math associated with it. So, for example, when you're 20 years old, you have 20 years worth of life, and you can look back on that with a 20-year perspective. But when you're 40 years old, you've now lived 2 of those 20-year time frames. So whatever's going on in the present moment of your life, the older you are, the older you are, the more it's a blip on the radar. Mm-hmm. So when you're 10 years old, the idea of having the summer off from school, that 3 months is a ridiculously long period of time. But when you're 20 years old and you get the same amount of time, based on context of time, it's half of what you experienced.
Sure.
So the older you get, the more what you're dealing with in the moment is just a smaller increment of time compared to the amount of time you've been on this earth. So that was basically the logic that they were using to be able to say, so when you're 60 years old and you talk about 10 years ago, well, let's make the math easier. When you're 50 years old and you talk about 10 years ago,
now you're talking my language.
That was 20% of your life.
Yep.
But when you're 20 years old and you talk about 10 years ago, that was 50% of your life ago. Mm-hmm. And that in and of itself, the context of understanding how time operates, knowing that it's, of course there are physicists that would argue this, but it's immutable in the sense that it just keeps going. So the older you get, the more that things that happen to you just tend to go faster. Mm-hmm. Now, that's true, and I think you would agree, correct?
100%.
As a general rule.
100%, yeah.
But at the same time, when you're in the middle of the shit, going back to it's over, now what? Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Let's go with the bad thing now. When you're in the middle of the shit, mm-hmm. Excuse me. Your ability to process the context of time really gets thwarted because your emotions overtake you. But when it's going well, your ability to process time is still equally as bad because you have more time on earth than other people, or you did when you were younger. So now time moves faster. Like the idea of when you're driving, let's say you're going to take the family on a road trip and you're going to go wherever and you're super excited about it. The drive there is super quick.
Yep.
Like you're excited. You're looking forward to it. You can't wait to get there, and it tends to go pretty well because your mind is positive about where you're going. Mm-hmm. But a week or two later, whenever you're ending your vacation, the road trip going home is what? Slow as hell.
Yep.
And their logic in this podcast was it's the opposite when you're a child. You have such a short period of time context that when you're driving to an exciting vacation, you're so excited that it takes forever to get there, mm-hmm. right? So you're in the car driving as dad, and you're like, I can't wait to get here. This is awesome. And the kids are in the back thinking the exact opposite. Like bummed because it's taking forever to get where they want to get excited to. Mm-hmm. And then on the way home, you're thinking, damn it, that shit's over. And the ride home takes forever. And their context of going home is just a little bit more shrunk because they're not overly anticipating the negative they're overly anticipating the positive.
Right, yeah.
So that's a roundabout way to sum up that podcast and to get back to the point of, I think the younger you are, the more likely you are to have a heightened anxiety of what is about to happen that's fun. And then the older you get, the more heightened anxiety you have about what's to happen that's a struggle.
Sure.
And then in the struggle, it takes forever. So now, you being early 50s, me being late 30s, if we were leaving a job, the last 2 weeks of that job would take forever.
Sure.
It would take forever because you're anticipating the end and it's not coming quick enough.
Yeah.
So the positive mindset, yet again, is maybe the only way to be able to help speed up time in a shitty situation.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
I look at in some of my moments of high anxiety, which I still have a lot. I will look at what's ahead of me in life, or potentially not ahead of me, given my age. And sometimes I'll get panicky about that. But then
because you feel like you're on the back nine.
Time's going by, man. Yeah. But then I'll have to remind myself, like I'll think, holy shit, I'm 51. I'm going to be 60 in the blink of an eye. Blink of an eye. And that is terrifying. But then I stop and I look back 10 years. I just did this. And I go, God, 10 years ago, I had a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 7-year-old. And I start thinking about life then. And it doesn't even feel like the same lifetime ago. It may as well have been 100 years ago. It wasn't. It does not feel like it was.
Certainly wasn't yesterday.
No.
Yeah.
And so, although I can say, man, time just goes, and all of a sudden my kids grew up, but when I really assess it and think back 10 years, wow, the life that has happened in the last 10 years. And that then brings calmness to me that, yes, time's going to go by fast. I'm going to be 60 before I know it. But holy shit, the amount of life that's going to happen in the next 10 years. Just like it did the last
100%, because a decade's a decade, it's going to do it again.
Right.
Interesting point. So like me with the divorce and me with trying to grow this organization being about 3 years in, I look at the clock differently just because the age number that I have is different.
Yep.
So I'm 38 years old, so I look at it going, okay, I don't know if I'm making 80 or not. Maybe I make 120. Mm-hmm. So maybe I'm not even a third of the way there. I don't know what the hell medicine's going to do or whatever. But I can look at that because my context of time says I'm not even middle-aged yet. Mm-hmm. So no matter what happens for the rest of my life, I have another lifetime to go. Now, I could argue that you could make 100. Mm-hmm. But I'm willing to bet that you don't look at the ages of 50 to 100 even in the vicinity of as optimistic as you would 0 to 50.
Correct. Right. I look at, like, if I'm lucky enough to make it to 100, the last 25 years are senior citizen age.
100%.
You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
So I look at, like, my productive years as another 25 years, which is weird, and it's all relative because someone who's 30 might look at, like, I got about 20 more years of productivity here, and then I'm going to be old. But now I'm 51, and I don't, now that extends. You follow me?
Yes.
And maybe it's because I don't have a retirement mentality of.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So, like, do you look at retirement as a, like, exciting thing to look forward to, or do you look at it as though I'm kind of finished and washed up?
I'm fighting a cough, sorry. So anyways,
You're allowed to be sick.
I don't look at, we've talked about this, I don't ever see myself as being completely retired. I'm always going to have assets producing income, whatever that is. Assets can be a million different things.
Of course.
But the point is, I don't ever look at, like, well, Chad, are you saying, like, if you live to be 100, that when you're 90, you're still going to be working? Well, no, I don't look at it like I'm going to be going to work 8 to 5 when I'm 90. But yes, when I'm 90, I expect that I'll still be earning income through asset ownership and my mind will still be active with, I'm going to use the term working, but not working in the classic 8 to 5, punch the clock. And so
I'm just not a fan of the idea that I want to wait until my quote-unquote retirement years, which I just arbitrarily mentally look at it as 65 plus.
Yeah.
I don't know why I do that, but I do. I don't look at that as like that's when I want to go do these things.
Correct. Now let me interrupt you right there, because that's exactly how I feel. If we're going to look at retirement, if someone's listening to this and is looking at retirement as the shit you do when you're retired, I'm doing that now. And I've been doing it my whole life. Well, what do you mean? Taking trips here, or these different experiences there, or buying this thing.
Or appreciating the family holidays,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
whatever.
So the things...
Or the new cycles of life, like now that you have pretty much all of your kids out of the house, that has a retirement component to it.
Right. So
Even though you're not retired.
yeah. So to some extent, I'm enjoying retirement right now. The things people would say they're waiting to do, if I was going to give advice to people about that, I'd say don't wait. Don't put some year on when you're going to enjoy whatever it is you think are retirement activities. Well, when I'm 65, because then you turn into all the people who wait, and it never happens, because life happens.
Well, okay, I like this. So let's go the opposite end of the spectrum. Think about when you were a new parent.
Yep.
Do you remember those times where you were about to put your son or one of your sons into kindergarten? And every parent has this level of anxiety that they want to get their kids in school, whether they're sick of paying for daycare, or they need a little bit of a break from home, or they just want to get them started, or they want to get them in school so that they can graduate and do their thing. And everyone's so excited about trying to get these kids into school.
Yeah. I wasn't.
So I wasn't either. And the same reason, my reason was, I'm just thinking about when you're going to be finishing high school.
Yeah.
So like, I know that I was a relatively young senior, and if I had an opportunity to choose it, I would have rather have been older in high school than younger, because I would have been in a better position to be a little bit more mature. Yes, granted, that's a little bit. But whether it was my body's a little bit bigger because I'm a little bit older in school and I can participate in sports at a different level, or I can go into college and have maybe a tiny bit more of a mature mind, et cetera, et cetera. The same dynamic happens whenever we're trying to get kids into college. Like, hey, take AP classes, start doing post-secondary and senior year. And it's like, well, okay, but are we really going to freak out over the difference between whether you're going to graduate college as a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old? Because the people that are having this discussion are typically in their late 30s, early 40s when their kids are going through that. So like, you being in your late 30s, early 40s, or whatever age you are, having a kid graduate from college, do you really think they're in an amazing position because they're 6 to 12 months younger than kids their age? No. Like, you know exactly what they are about to embark on. Like, I have a 20-year-old who's a junior in college who is starting to experience more of the like, holy shit, this is life.
Yep.
Like bills and pressure and jobs and careers and comparing yourself to other people and the whole thing.
Yeah.
So like I changed my tune a lot, where now it's like, why are you in such a hurry? You have so many years to figure. You could graduate college at the age of 22, even if you went to college, start a career, it not go your way, and start something completely different at 25 or 26, and you're still just 25 or 26.
Yeah.
But we know that because of the context of time.
Yeah.
But a 22-year-old coming out of college doesn't understand that, because, again, 10 years ago, they were in frickin' 6th grade. So that processing of time in regards to how you view people's lot in life is a very weird dynamic, where I was 35. Yeah, I was 35 when I started this company. if I would have started it at 45, I'm still very young as a 45-year-old.
Absolutely.
I could have started this company at 55.
Yeah.
And I'm still very young starting a new company. But the only thing you do is look at your own lot in life and say, but I'm 35 and I need to be able to do blank, 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 and blank in order to feel like I'm keeping up with the Joneses or that I'm making the kind of money that I want. And that anxiety is really, really, really powerful.
For sure.
Sometimes it's motivating and sometimes it's demotivating. But the going back to the it's over, now what? I think anybody in their life starting something new, and you and I are still, both of us, new in this organization.
Yep.
I think the right mentality is to almost always assume that you are younger than you think you are and that you have plenty of time ahead of you. Now, could we die on the way home? 100%. But the reality is if that doesn't happen, which statistically it won't, then we both have a massive amount of life ahead of us.
Yeah. Well, that's my mentality. I mean, you and I, for example, we'll call it you're 40-ish. You're looking at the door of 40
Right.
coming up, and I just closed the door of 50. So I look at myself as if I was 40. I'll tell myself when I'm having those anxious moments I told you about where I think, holy shit, 60's coming soon. I'll say, well, if you were 40 right now, if you were 41 instead of 51, how would you feel? Boy, I'd feel really good.
You feel pretty damn good.
Right. So
But you judge the present moment because of the fact that you have 51 years behind you.
Yeah.
And you feel like there's a part of the 51 that you wasted.
Correct. But at the end of the day, there's no difference other than my mentality.
Correct.
So I can choose how I'm going to attack that moving forward.
100% accurate. I totally agree. And I don't know if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I would have been able to understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because I was always priding myself on trying to be young and early to the game. I got married young, kids young, career young, and I was enjoying the fact that was going fairly well for me young. And I remember when I started at my old company when I was 24 years old, and I would look at the dudes that were older than me that were 30 plus and be like, man, they are established and unbelievably well ahead of me. And then you blink your eyes and you're 32, 34 or whatever it works out to be. And it's like, oh, like I'm just getting started on this shit. Like just getting started. So the mentality. So I think the answer to the question from however many minutes ago is if you're in the middle of ending something that you're struggling with and you're trying to process that chapter closing, the best thing you can do is focus on how much you have left in the tank more so than what you've extinguished. For example, remember when you turned 30 and people around you were losing their minds? I think the only reason why that happens is because when you turn 30, you turn around and go, oh, I've been out of high school 12 years, I've been out of college 8 years, and have I or have I not accomplished anything? And what do you do right around that age? You go to a frickin' high school reunion, give or take.
Yeah.
And what are people doing? Posturing, comparing, trying to show other people around them what they've accomplished in the years beyond high school.
Yeah.
And, I view 40 as the same way. Like, I can look back, even with the divorce, even with a career that went great and then didn't end well, and starting a new company. And I'll be, give or take, 5 years into the business whenever I turn 40. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, but I know that I have a shit ton more left to go. I think almost everyone that struggles with the monumental birthdays, aka your decade turning, is because you're regretful about what you did or did not do, and now you judge the shit out of yourself and probably thwart your ability to accomplish more because you're so focused on what did or did not happen in the past.
Yeah. Well, one thing that happens when you get a little bit older, like myself, is you do start to look back and see that it really wasn't that big of a deal in the first place, and that a lot of the people that you thought, class reunions are just kind of a precursor to Facebook, right? It was just people trying to impress you with showing you what they want.
It's so true.
Right.
Just posturing.
Right. I'm going to show you a part of my life that I want to show you so I can impress you, but I'm not going to share with you all the,
All the shit
All the
that
shit.
happens in life.
and,
Yes.
And you get to a certain age, whatever that is for people, and you start to realize that everyone's on their own timetable, and me at 51, some of the people I thought were so successful at when I was 40, now I get to 50 and I realize, well, no, they were just kind of like me, and they still are kind of like me. But I had a perception that they were not like me. But at the end of the day, again, we all control our attitude and our emotions.
Yeah, but it's the comparing. It goes back to it's over, now what? If you're leaving a job, if you're leaving a relationship, or whatever the life-changing circumstances, the main thing that thwarts your ability to look at the future with a positive outlook is the fucking judgment from other people.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
The judgment from other people is so devastatingly strong, and nobody wants their reputation to be crap. So sometimes when you're in the transition, it's over, now what? The now what is the transition. And the transitionary phase is the most challenging component, because you have to rebuild, redo, or not even rebuild, redo. You just have to build, and you just have to do in order to position yourself to wake up X number of months or years later and say, look at what I've done. But what are you doing by doing that? You're going back to the same mentality that you had before of judgment.
Do you, at the age that you're at now, do you ever look back and realize that some of the things you were worried about in terms of other people's judgment of you, you realize they probably weren't even thinking about you in the first place? Because that definitely has happened to me now. So my kids are spread out in age enough as yours are. And eventually I think you'll see this with your younger kids when they get to be 16, 17, 18. As you start to reassociate with maybe some of the, let's say, parents or people that were part of your parent world of the older kids, maybe some of the people you thought were judging you, you might realize, boy, they really didn't even have any clue. So not only were they not judging me, they didn't even know what was up. So that's happening to me right now. So my older two boys, one's out of college, one's going to graduate soon. We were involved heavily in the community, in all aspects of the community. And now, as my younger two are going through high school and almost out of high school, and I'm kind of circling back occasionally with some of those parents from the first group of boys, my boys, what I'm learning is they really weren't aware of all the crap that I thought they were aware of where they were judging me. So they weren't judging me because they didn't really actually know in the first place. So it was all me perceiving what other people think and realizing they weren't thinking of me. They weren't judging me because they didn't even know. I just assumed they knew.
I forget the quote, and I'm going to butcher it trying to sum it up, but basically one of my favorite quotes about this talks about you'd be amazed to know how seldom people around you are actually thinking about you.
Right.
Like, you think they're thinking about you regularly and judging you and making their opinions and telling other people or whatever. Maybe it's good or bad. Maybe you accomplished something amazing and your family and friends heard out that you got promoted, or you made X number of dollars, or you did whatever. Or maybe you did something dumb or something went really bad. But we're all in our own little world. And we think about ourselves and ourselves alone the majority of the time. Mm-hmm. Even though that sounds bad, it's true. So with that being said, that would by default mean that they're not thinking about you even close to the amount that you think that they are. So even when you have that family member, that friend, whatever that you feel judged by, maybe they've even told you that they've judged you. With that being said, they're in their own world, they're doing their own thing, and they probably really don't think about you very often.
Right.
No, maybe when they do, they judge you, and fuck them for doing so.
Yeah.
Because when you think about them and you're judging them, they should say, fuck you for judging them, right? Like, that's what you should do. But but our self-esteem is a very fragile thing, and it's very easy to sit there and step back and say, look at all the things I've done wrong or the things that I did or did not do, and think that other people are obsessing about it, but in reality they're not. They're just not.
It just, thinking back to the consultant I met today that's concerned about when he leaves this current contract, how we're going to think of him as his vendor, how his current client's going to think of him depending on how he exits. You're right. At the end of the day, they're probably not going to think much. It's going to come and go, and a month from now he's going to be in his new role, and the people he thought were so judgmental about him have all moved on with their work and their life. And
well, right, and okay, so this individual is choosing to do the right thing, and to him credit is due.
Sure.
Because he's sensitive to the other people involved in him leaving a job and going to a new job, and that is to his credit. But at the same time, I made the joke earlier when we were talking about this story, he's going to leave. And 2 or 3 years from now, or whatever number of time that goes by, if we were to help him again, outside of him legitimately screwing us over, we will forget.
Yeah.
We will not recall 2 years from now whether he gave a full 2-week notice or did the old, I can only give you a week because of this situation. Mm-hmm. In the moment, it might hurt us, particularly now. And we don't even know if that's what he's doing, but just in the story. But at the end of the day, it's not going to hurt.
Yeah.
When you really screw people over, that's when they might remember, which he isn't doing. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that just made me think of a former coworker at one of my former companies. This person had worked for this company, I think, 15 years earlier, for about 5 years. And then he had come back after like 12 years of being gone. And at one point I remember asking him, after he had been there now the second time with me, and I'm asking him, well, what was it like the first time you were here? And I got the whole story, and it didn't end very positively, as oftentimes doesn't. But even there, the same owner, same small company, brought him back with open arms, because over time, that owner obviously forgot about whatever it was that at the time seemed such a big deal, and only remembered all the positive stuff about him, and he came back, and he's been there ever since.
I love this story. I was just connected with one of my old colleagues from my former life. And him and I were talking, and he was describing a situation where our old employer, had a switch up in salespeople and then move people around. And I was surprised to hear that they met with him again to have a discussion about bringing him back.
Yep.
Now, this guy was a 10, 15-year employee, maybe even longer, had a ton of contests, had killed it in his job. A new manager took over. She came in trying to establish authority, not in a bad way, just, whatever.
Yep.
And he had a down year at that time, so he was kind of on the radar. And he was made as an example, for lack of a better word, in that moment, demoted, and then ultimately let go. Now, 4, 5, 6 years later, I don't even know how many years, I think 6 is a fair guess, he is sitting down with them about the possibilities of going back.
Yep.
Now, you can imagine, if he was 1 month gone and they were sitting down about bringing him back, he would have been loving the idea. Keep me here. I don't want to change. This is too much. I want to keep going. Now, 5, 6 years later, he met with them. He was appreciative of the discussion. He felt like he owed it to them to have that discussion. And I don't even know if they offered it to him or not, but ultimately he didn't go back.
Yeah.
So
So I have this.
it's the context of time where he had 6 years to step back and go, what do I want? Do I want to be there? Are they the right employer for me?
Yeah.
How do I feel about how we ended? Do I feel more optimistic about my current state compared to going back, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
And again, if it was right in the moment, he would have gone back. But since it was now 6 years past, time had moved on, and he was cool. He was chill. It didn't even bother him anymore. And he's like, I'm good where I am.
Yeah. I have a friend that went back to this company that I spent all these years with. In that scenario, he left on not so great terms, was gone for several years. He's now back. Now, me, I've been gone the whole time. I think, God, why would they take him back? And then I started thinking, outside of two people, everybody from...
He's brand new.
He's brand new.
Yeah.
And I'm talking from the HR, the VP of HR, the director of HR, the manager of HR, the various managing directors of area, regional...
Sales this, sales that.
Yep,
Yeah.
they're all gone. They're all gone. So to 90-some% of this big company that he went back to, he's just a new guy that used to work there and had went to President's Club. So it's all good.
And they're different.
And he's different.
He's different and they're different.
Yep.
So the reality is it would be a fresh start in a sense. He understands a portion of the culture, but ultimately it would be a fresh start. And he has to decide, do I want to go back or do I not? And obviously people go different directions, but...
Geez, now we just messed up the whole podcast, Jeremy, because when it's over...
Yeah, when it's over, now what? Apparently you go back.
Yeah.
Anywho. Well, I love it. Great show. We are going to come back again next week with another topic. We got a guest book for 2 weeks from now, which is going to be really cool. We got somebody coming in to give stories about both sides of the recruiting aisle.
I love stories.
Somebody who's been in the industry and can talk about the staffing business. Somebody who's been in the industry on the HR corporate side can talk about what they're going through. So I'm excited to have her in here. And we appreciate your time, and we will see you again next week for Hire and Fire episode 12. See you, bye. You just got done listening to Hire and Fire, a production by Pyra Consulting. Please check us out online on either LinkedIn, Facebook, or our website at pyraconsulting.com. That's PIRA consulting.com.